Hiring, honestly, is one of the toughest jobs as a leader, I would say. But in the end, you need to get people who can do your job and do it better than you.
What's the hardest role to hire for?
I would say it has to be sales leaders, because I feel like sales people know how to interview well. So they'll tell you what you want to hear.
What's your favorite interview question to ask a CS or go-to-market leader?
What was the biggest failure you had in your career? And what did you learn from it? And then I flip it and say, what is your most proud moment? What do they like to do outside of work? Because I think culture is very important for me.
It sounds like you're actually going broader than just AI too, and kind of like assessing, is somebody just had a learning mindset?
People ask me like, well, what do I have to do to be a great leader? You're a great leader if your circle of influence is greater than your circle of power.
Welcome to Whispered Hiring, the podcast where we talk with senior leaders about how they find, vet, attract, and grow world-class talent. I'm Josh Hannewinkle, GM at Whispered, and today I'm joined by one of the most influential voices shaping modern customer success and revenue transformation. Sanjay Kini is the Chief Customer Strategy Officer at 6sense. He spent the past 7 years of his tenure as the Chief Customer Officer building a category-defining company. Sanjay grew the customer organization from a team of 5 to a team of 300 plus, and company revenue from 5 million to 200 million. In that role, Sanjay led customer success, customer experience, platform adoption, customer support, training, and sales engineering. And prior to 6sense, Sanjay helped scale multiple companies through IPO and hypergrowth, including Rational Software and Responses. He's also a limited partner with Stage 2 Capital, serves on G2's executive advisory board, and advises companies like Factors.ai on go-to-market strategy. Across all of it, he's become a leading voice on ABX, intent data, the dark funnel, and what it really means for CS teams to operate as true change agents. Sanjay, welcome. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Josh. Really excited to talk about this. It's very near and dear to my heart, so I'm excited.
Yeah, awesome. Let's dive right in. You've had an incredible run at 6sense. What's been the key to getting the right leaders into the business at the right time and doing it at scale?
It's a good question, Josh. I think every time you go through a certain phase of growth. So for instance, like you mentioned, I've been Chief Customer Officer for over 7 years. And if someone asked me every year what my job was, it was different for every one of those 7 years. You need to get the right people at the right time. And I'm a big believer that it's better to overhire so that you can kind of grow the team to a point where you know the growth is going to come. So might as well hire senior leaders up front and then help get in the right people. They'll get in the right people from then on. So we made a conscious decision back in 2017, 2018 to say, hey, we're going to get senior people and let them kind of grow their teams. But at the same time, what we also did is we also got a bunch of young up-and-comers who we believed would be the future leaders of the company. And, maybe they come in as ICs, but we know that they're going to be like VPs and SVPs in the years to come. So that was kind of our strategy and philosophy when we started off back in 2017.
Yeah, I'd be fascinated to hear more about just the vetting process, I guess, for that, and how you know, or you think, or you have some level of confidence that somebody who's maybe 5 years into their career, 10 years in, is going to be, the leader of a department.
There's no right answer. Hiring, honestly, is one of the toughest jobs as a leader, I would say.
Agreed.
And probably the number one job that you have. Like you have all these different everyday roles. Like as a Chief Customer Officer, I was responsible for adoption and driving value and retention and upsells and things like that. But in the end, you cannot do it all. Like I think we were 30 customers when I started, up to about 100 customers. I could name the customer, name the CMO of that company. But in the end, you need to get people who can do your job and do it better than you. So I think the philosophy is, number one is, as a leader, you need to realize what are you good at and what are you not good at, right? So then you want to hire people who can cover up your issues or cover up things that you're not good at. So I think, that's not having that ego to say I'm great at everything and hiring people who you think are going to come and help you make this a better org. And then the vetting process, again, if you have someone who's done a good job somewhere else, it doesn't mean that they'll be good at this job as well. There's so many different factors that go into it. It could be a different industry. It could be we're selling to different type of customer. The size of the company. If they were good at Oracle, where I worked, they might not be good at 6sense when we were 30, 50, 100 people. Because you have to, even if you're like SVP or CCO, you're still, you know, you got to get your hands dirty. You got to make sure you're working super hard and trying to learn new things and be curious and all that. So you have to vet all those things out. What I get it mainly to is, I think, two or three different things. One is, you probably heard the phrase skill and will. So do they have the skill to do it, and do they have the will to be better? And the will kind of boils down into things like curiosity, as well as the the ability to work hard and figure shit out. Um, Sorry, am I allowed to say shit?
Apparently, it's great.
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, I think that's I think those are kind of the things. And then there's the culture aspect as well. Like, what do we stand as a company? Um, a lot of times it might not be a culture fit. So you got to vet all these things out before you hire.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Curious, like what an interview loop might look like, or or if there's frameworks or systems that you leverage to try to get at skill will.
Yeah. We use this framework called Who. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah. Big fan.
It's actually really good. It's trying to understand, first of all, as a hiring manager, you try to figure out, you want to build your org without people in mind, right? So you say, okay, if I had a clean slate, how would I build this org? And then what are some of the attributes I need for each of the leaders in those space, for the ICs, and then come up with all that criteria, right? So from that perspective, I think that's the framework we thought was really good. And sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, just kind of asking, like, what does a typical interview look like, or like systems or frameworks that?
Yeah. So who was the framework? But then we also want to make sure there are at least 5 or 6 people who interview the person. So typically it would be the hiring manager is kind of running the show, obviously working with the people partner, um, who's managing all the logistics, as well as like being the voice with the interviewee. But then you want to make sure the hiring manager, there's some peers. And then what I like to do is, let's say you're interviewing someone for CS, you still want to have someone from other departments interview that person. So maybe it's sales, maybe it's product. Because in the end, as a CS person, you have to interact with those people. Maybe it's an SC leader, right? So we made sure that was the case. And then towards the end, you would, like, I think my team started at about 5 people, till maybe 100. I was interviewing every single person, because, and sometimes it was just a stamp, but I think, that's where I come in at the end, and culture and all that. But what I also like to do and want to do is make sure that the hiring manager has the authority. Like, a lot of times it's a consensus thing. Like, I've noticed in previous jobs where, 5 people interviewed, 3 said yes, 2 said no, and then, we're going to hire, or if it's 2 or 3, you say no. But in the end, I want it to be the hiring manager's decision, because in the end, they're the person who will be judged on whether this is a good hire or not.
I can imagine if that's the case, though, too, you probably go back and you're poking at that hiring manager and going like, "But are you sure?" I mean, are there situations, and like, how have you thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you got to empower them, but at the same time, you got to guide them as well. So I think I told you earlier, one of the things I'm most proud of at 6sense is, obviously we grew as a company, but we ended up growing to 300. And at one point I had, I think, 58 managers reporting to me. But what I'm most proud of is that 40 of those came from internal. So we internally
It's
promoted.
amazing.
And then the other thing that I'm really happy about is 37 of them were women. So, that's one thing I'm really passionate about, like making sure, getting women, they're amazing, and especially in customer success. So those are kind of things that we kind of drove towards at 6sense. But yeah, the vetting process, the interview process is really important. We made sure that the hiring manager basically decides. And then I had to guide him. And at some point, I had a VP who would guide the frontline managers and poke them in the right way to say, hey, here's what I saw. You sure that and maybe they didn't think about those things. And now they think about it and say, yeah, you're right. Or they say, no, I strongly believe that this is the person. And if they say they strongly believe, then we would go ahead and hire anyway.
Yeah. I like that. I like that you're forcing the accountability down on the manager. If we back out of building your own team for a minute, I have to imagine you've also helped to build the executive team, just given the run that you've been on there.
Yep.
And I'm curious if you have a thought on just like what's the hardest role to hire for, whether it's marketing or sales ops or
I would say it has to be sales leaders. That's the toughest role to hire for. Because I feel like salespeople know how to interview well. So they'll tell you what you want to hear. And, typically, when you interview like a CS person or product person, marketing person, they're talking, they'll be um, g- genuine is the wrong word, but I do think like salespeople know how to interview. So you have to try and figure out what is true and what's not, and try and figure out, are they really meaning what they're saying and things like that. Uh, and for me, I feel like that's where the rubber hits the road, where your like sales leaders are extremely tough to hire and the good ones are already taken. So now you got to go find people. I think it has to be data driven, where you look at the numbers, and then sometimes if you look at the numbers, that doesn't tell the whole story too, because is it an easy product to sell?
sure.
Did they do all the work, or were they leaning more on their leaders or their SEs and things like that? So what is their EQ? So we used to go like really deep when it came to hiring sales leaders.
Kind of sticking with that, when you're hiring senior roles at 6sense, have you guys been posting them? Do you rely more on networks, referrals, targeted outreach? Like, how have you been going about getting the right people in on the funnel side?
For senior positions, I think I'm not a big fan of posting. I feel like, when you're in a group of senior leaders, the network is pretty good. So what we would do is either find someone from our own network or someone from the execs networks. We have great board members. So we'd go to the board and, ask, they have their own network, and, we'd go and try and find people through that network as well. The big problem with putting exec, like VP and above level positions, is you'll get 500 applications, and now probably in today's day, probably more like
1,500, yeah.
yeah, and I'd say 90% of that is riffraff. Um, you know, and then the gems kind of get hidden in there, unfortunately. So you probably will find 5 or 10 in those 1,500 that are good, but especially when it comes to a senior leader, you want to be sure, because one mistake there can cost you like big time. And not to say that you can hire from your network and not be wrong, but the chances are a lot higher, I would say, given it's coming from the network. You still do your due diligence and figure out if they're the right person for the role.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of networking, a lot of referrals. I love the comment around like, leveraging the board and trying to see what you can get out of there as well. Let's jump back maybe to building out your own team. And what's your favorite interview question to ask a CS or go-to-market leader that might be considering joining? And like, what does a great answer reveal about them?
It's tough to answer like what's my favorite question, because I think there are 3 or 4. So what I typically try to do is, like we talked about earlier, try to figure out the skill and will. But I want to I tend to spend more time on the will, because I do feel like if the skill is not there, you can kind of get people to rise and learn, as long as the will is really strong. And so I spend more time on that, and my questioning tends to be around that. So one question would be around, um, tell me about a failure that you had. Like, what was the biggest failure you had in your career? And what did you learn from it? And describe it. What do you learn from it? How do you use it in today's life? Right. And then I flip it and say, what is your most proud moment in your career? What did you do? So it's kind of getting both aspects and kind of digging into that story and trying to see how genuine and authentic that person is. And then the other two things I like to ask is like, I want to know what they think about themselves. So I'll ask, what is your superpower? And then ask why. You get like all kinds of answers. It's very interesting when you ask that question, what is your superpower? And then lastly, I try to ask a question around what do they like to do outside of work? Because I think culture is very important for me. Getting to know the person, what do they like to do? What kind of a person are they? We spend 8, 10, 12 hours a day sometimes with the same people. You want to be able to have fun with them as well. In fact, fun is one of our um, attributes that we're looking for when we hire at 6sense. So that's our values. In our value statement, we have fun as being one of them. So definitely, we want to get that all-around perspective of that person. Does that
Yeah,
answer?
yeah, it does. I like the holistic approach. I was going to go back to the weakness because you mentioned one of the, I guess I've got my own thoughts on it, but if you go back to the weakness question, like what are you looking for someone to share? How are you looking for them to approach that question? Is it closed? Is it open?
It's not necessarily weakness. It's like a failure. So you could have done your best job and failed. And so what I'm looking for is how do they kind of how do they manage adversity? And then are they able to come out of it? So especially in CS, you could be doing like amazing work. And then, for instance, the board, like the company gets bought by someone else, and
Sure.
now you lose that customer, and it could be your biggest customer. And those are kind of moments that you have to kind of realize, okay, does this person have the tenacity, the strength to work through adversity? And that's kind of what I'm looking for, because a lot of times customer success is a very thankless job. uh, you know you 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 do all the renewals and you keep customers happy and no one talks about it, but then you lose a customer and then your CEO calls you like,
Everybody talks about it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think you need that DNA in you to be able to handle adversity. So I try to figure that out as well. 'Cause,
Yeah. I like that. When you're interviewing, um, someone, what are examples of questions you want them to ask you?
I'll kind of break it up into two parts. Yeah. Now, what I want them to ask me and what I feel is a bad answer as well. Well, bad questions. So
Sure.
a lot of times you find, so the good ones, I'll tell you upfront, are people who have done the research. They've spent time on your website. They've researched you. They have questions that are not just superficial, but go like a level deeper, like one or two levels deeper, where you say, hey, I noticed like when we talked last time, you said your retention rate is kind of dropping. Um, can we get into details of why? And what do you think we can do to help improve it? And then coming with some perspective around that as well, right? So being more specific in your questioning, that kind of starts conversation. So I think that's really important. I think the other thing is, having done that research, if they ask about culture, I think that's a cool thing too. Like they want to know, like understanding, like what is it that this company is all about? Asking questions about the company's future. I think those are good questions too. And I like people who are assertive. And so, like, if they don't close the meeting with Nick, what are next steps? Or how did you think I did? Do you think I have the job? I think those are all good questions. What I don't like is I've had people where it's like, so do you have any questions? And they'd be, oh no, I think you've answered it all. Right? To me, that means that person has not done the research, or is not curious, or is not thought this through. So that's one. I would also say asking simple questions like, oh, what does your company do? Like, I think if I knew that, I would stop the interview right there. Like, but asking questions that are available on the website easily. So I would avoid those kind of questions.
Yeah, like questions that show a lack of research. Yeah. Hey, we didn't talk about this prior, and if you don't have an answer, I think that's totally okay. I'm curious. 6sense has been at the front edge of like AI and revenue, and how are you assessing AI fluency in your hiring, especially over the past 18, 24 months?
Yeah, I mean, AI is part of our lives now, and if you don't use it, you're kind of left behind. So it is definitely something we are including in our interview process. What I like to do personally is try to figure out like how fluent they are and how much it is part of their daily workflow, whether it's both personal or professional. So that's the question I would ask is like, hey, tell me how you use AI in your professional life today and how do you use it in your personal life? And then more specifically, like if it's a CS role, I'll go into details of how they're using AI to make the job easy for themselves if they're a leader, or are they going to make it easier for their whole company and things like that. And then like you also ask them just from a fluency perspective, okay, you're in CS, what have you seen in product? What is product doing? So to see if they go beyond. So one of the things I like to tell my team is to do something every year that is beyond your circle of power. So you have like people ask me like, well, what do I have to do to be a great leader? And a lot of times you have it's actually copied from Meg Whitman. She used to say this: you're a great leader if your circle of influence is greater than your circle of power.
Mm.
Which means like, let's say I'm a CS leader and I'm responsible for retention and upsells and customer value and adoption and things like that. What am I doing that makes the product team and the sales team and the marketing team feel like we cannot afford to lose this person because sales is better, product is better, marketing is better because of this person, right? So those are kind of things. And now if in today's age, if you're able to go back and tell sales, hey, by the way, you should be thinking about doing this using AI to help us predict our um, forecast better and things like that, or help our AEs. Like, here's what we're doing in CS before a meeting using AI to summarize what's happened. Maybe sales can be doing that as well. So those are the kind of things like you want them to say during the interview to make you feel like they're up to date and current, basically, and not a dinosaur.
I think I was going to say on that point, it sounds like you're actually going broader than just AI too, and kind of like assessing, is somebody just have a learning mindset? And I think like that's
Mhm.
obviously super powerful as you consider like bringing the right people into the company.
Yep.
You often talk about CS as a transformation role, not just a support function. And when you hire a senior leader, curious just what you do in the first 90 days to make sure you set them up to drive transformation successfully.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. And I think you're hitting on something that is near and dear to me, which is when you hire someone, I think pretty much in the first few weeks, you know if that person is a home run, a single double, or a
I always
failure.
say day one. Day one,
Yeah,
it's like, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'd say like maybe exactly in the first week for sure. But sometimes it takes a month. Like week one, you probably know if good or bad. But by month one, you should be able to know good or great, right? So being able to identify that. But a lot of it has to do with, sometimes I kind of blame us as a company if someone doesn't do well. Did we enable them the right way? Did we set them up for success? So I feel like in order for us to make sure that we're getting the best out of that person, you got to set the expectations right. You say, hey, here are your goals. Here's what you need to do, right? And then here's how you learn how to do that. a lot of times, like, I think my role and every leader's role is to remove obstacles from your teams. So have that one-on-one conversation where you're working with them to figure out, okay, are you hitting your goal? If not, why? What help do you need? And then working through that to help them figure out, okay, here's how you get to your path. Just setting them up for success. And then at that point, it becomes, their job to do or not do what they're supposed to.
You wanted to talk a little bit about, I think, references as well, Sanjay, and just how you go about that. I'd be really curious. I think this is a controversial area and sometimes, and I just love to hear your thoughts on reference checking as you get to the backside of a process.
Yeah. I mean, today we live in a world with LinkedIn and, networks and all that. So I would say I am not a big believer on deciding whether to go with the candidate or not based on references that the candidate provides. It's very rare that you'll find someone who says, "Don't hire this person," and here's why. So, I do a lot of back channeling, and the back channel typically, like, it's very rare that you would not be able to have like one either connected to someone who knows them or one level apart just amongst your team. So I go back and do that. But I do feel like the references that they provide will be useful as well. But it's more, okay, we've already decided to hire this person. Now let's go to their references and try and figure out what do we need to do to make them successful. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How do they operate well? How do they thrive? So those are the kind of things that I try to get out of references that they provide to me, because that person probably knows that the interviewee a lot better than the back channel that I did, right? So the back channel is typically just to understand like reputation. They may not have worked with them one on one, but they know people who worked with them. And you got to be sensitive to this as well, because sometimes they're interviewing while they're at another company. So like my rule is, you can't jeopardize them finding out and all that. So I would never put them at in jeopardy in that sense where it's going to go back to their boss and all that. So you got to be sensitive about those kind of things. But I think back channeling is definitely something that, especially for a senior, anytime it's a frontline manager and above, it's a non-negotiable, I'd say.
How do you think about negative feedback that you get through a back channel, knowing that I'd love to think everybody likes me, but like I'm sure that's not the case, and like I've probably rubbed people the wrong way in my career. Like, how do you think about that and kind of package in some negativity that might come out of a back channel? Is that a deal breaker?
No, it's not a deal breaker. I think a lot of times, they might say things that are not relevant to this job, right?
Hmm.
So for instance, you might be, I'll give you an example. For instance, like 6sense, we have enterprise, strategic customers, enterprise customers, and SMB. And you might find out that you're hiring someone for the enterprise team, and that person was managing both enterprise and SMB at the previous job. And you find out, oh, you know what? They were good at enterprise, but they sucked at managing like the smaller accounts where you had CSMs managing 50 accounts a person. And so in that case, you're like, okay, that's not part of their role, right? So it's fine. So that's more like from a responsibility perspective, but I see what you're saying. Sometimes it could be personality as well, right? So they say, oh, they rub people the wrong way sometimes because they're very abrasive or something like that. That could come out. So then the question becomes, there's always an area of gray where you do want people to talk and stand up for what they think is right. Like I would rather have someone say, hey, CEO or hey, CCO, you're doing your job wrong. Not
Yeah,
in those
yeah,
words. But I want to hear people who can tell me like without, brown nosing and saying, oh, you're awesome. This is great. Like you tend to hear that a lot. But people who actually say, hey, by the way, this sucked and do it respectfully one on one. And, sometimes that rubs people the wrong way. For me, actually, it would be great if someone does that, because in the end, I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to make the team better. I'm trying to make the company better. So we need to, if I find that, then I'll go and dig with someone else to see, hey, is this really bad or is this being done in a positive way? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I like your point too on like triangulation. Then like, all right, great. Let me go talk to somebody else and try to understand around that same thing. I kind of like triangulate. What am I getting here? Because I completely agree with you. The ability to insert friction into a business and like have those hard conversations is some of the most important
Yeah.
conversations that can be had.
Yeah. And, it's called constructive tension. You remember we did that together with, what was that methodology?
Probably Challenger
Challenger.
if
That's
we're
right.
back in responses days. Yes. There's one thing I took away from that experience. In
Yeah.
addition to great people, is Challenger. Yeah. Challenger methodology. Always our final question. Who's the best hire you've ever made and what made them exceptional?
Oh, that's a tough question. There are so many, like when you grow a team to 300, there are so many. But, I probably want to give you at least two examples. Like I won't name the people, but, I was talking about earlier, you want to hire people for their potential and not what they are today. We've had numerous people at 6sense who started off as ICs and ended up being VPs and SVPs, running from never being a manager to managing 50, 100 people. So yeah, I think for me, what gives me the most joy is when I see these people who have now blossomed into something that even they didn't think they were capable of doing. And to me, like, I feel like this is just the beginning for them. Like my goal is like a few years from now, um, have 10 CCOs come out of people who were part of my team. And I can see that happening already in the next, 6, 7 years, hopefully. If my kids were here, they would be saying 6, 7. Uh, but, but yeah, I think I'm pretty passionate about that. I've had a bunch of people who've done really well, gone to SVP level, gone to VP level. So that's kind of one story. But then the other story I would want to say is you bring in the right people at the right time. So I'd mentioned earlier hiring people who can fill in your deficiencies. So I feel like, there's like I was almost managing two types of people. One who need help to grow, and the other one is like, hey, they've done this before. Let's just hire them. And then I can close my eyes and just let them be. So, I've hired, person who used to be my boss at my previous company. And then just basically, I didn't have to worry about it because I know what he's good at, because I used to work for him. And he built the team again from 5 or 10 people to about 50, 60 people. And it was amazing, right? So that, and, someone who's done the job before. So I feel like when you hire people and they do what um, you expect them and 10 times more, that's what gives you the most joy. And, I feel like we've had a bunch of these at 6sense. And for me, there's nothing more that gives me more joy than seeing them thrive. And not just people in my team, right? So there are some people who, in sales who I helped hire, and they ran like, I helped hire them and now they're running team of 100 plus. So again, that goes back to circle of power, circle of influence. Like I feel really proud that I was part of helping get some sales leaders who helped us kind of get to where we are today. But yeah, I feel like in the end, the best hires are people who can come and replace you. And I think I have a couple people who could do that at 6sense, who could replace me so I can go do the next thing.
It's awesome. Well, Sanjay, thank you. This was amazing. I love all the insights you shared, and I think our audience is really going to appreciate it. And it's just really good to see you too. So thanks for making the time.
Hey, thanks, Josh. This is awesome. I really appreciated all the questioning, and it was a great discussion. If anybody feels like they want any more insights from me, just feel free to sanjaykini@gmail.com.
Awesome, man. Thanks again.
Yeah.